here I just want to talk you through my 3 best tips for organizing your models, your Power BI desktop models. 3 quick tips, but all I feel essential especially if you're starting to learn Power BI. Just makes understanding what's going on with Power BI, and also just from your own understanding, when you develop a model and then come back to it, you want things just organized and arranged in a very intuitive way. So these are my best practice tips for that. Now, the very first one, and why we started in data model, is that I really like to set up my data models the same way every time. And I like to always place what are called my lookup tables, which are basically my filtering tables in a lot of cases. I like to always put them at the top and have my fact tables, which are basically the underlying, say in most cases it's going to be like a transaction table, or a table that has every single row as an iteration of information. And I always like to have that down the bottom. Now, the reason I do this is because it is just so much easier mentally to be able to picture how filters flow when you are able to picture them going downhill. And you can see that the arrow, and also just positioned like this. If you have just things everywhere, it's really hard just mentally, I feel, to truly understand, well, which direction a filter is flowing, what sort of impact is a filter that I might place on a visualization going to have on some calculation that I might have as well. And even when you get into more advanced DAX calculations, it's just understanding what is a lookup table and what is a fact table, and being able to jump into your model and very quickly understand that is really, really beneficial. So that's my first tip. My second tip is to create measure groups or measure tables whenever you can. So this is a pretty small data set, but I'm sure a lot of people watching who've brought data into their models will have some tables which are just crazy long in terms of the columns that you have in your tables. So you may have, I've seen tables with 150 columns in them, and I'm searching for particular dimensions down here, or measures, especially when you create maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 50 measures all within these tables, is just an absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare. You need to be able to easily go and reference the calculations that may be happening, that you may want to use inside of visualizations, inside of tables, etc. And you just don't want to have to be searching through all of these tables to go and find where your measure has landed or where your measures are. So to create a measure table is really straightforward. It should be more straightforward, truthfully, but it's just a few steps that we have to go through. If you do this a couple of times, it just becomes so much easier after a little while. But to create a measure table, you first of all have to go into data, and then just put a placeholder in there. I just put a 1, and then you just name the table something, and in this case I'll just call it key measures, and then I'm going to go load. And so that's actually going to create a table, but we are going to turn it into a measure table. At the moment, this table is just sitting in our data model. It's got no connection, should have no connection to our actual data model. So it just sits off to the side there. And then what we want to do is we want to create a measure inside of this group now. And so I'm just going to create the simplest measure possible, total sales, and all I've got to do is sum up the total revenue column. I've got to go sum first, obviously. So I've created my first measure. You can see that the measure is identified via the calculator there. Then we're almost there. We just need to do a couple more steps. So we just need to hide this column. Don't delete it, hide it. And then up here, we just need to go in and out with this show hide pane. So I'm just going to click once in and once out. And now you'll see that we actually have a double calculator basically. And that signifies a measure group. And then also the measures now pop up to the top, which is also really handy. Because honestly, I have a couple of models that maybe have 10 of these measure groups, and having them all at the top and then just really well named groups as well, it's just seriously easy to go and find the measures that I'm going to use in particular report pages or visualizations that I'm creating. Okay, so that's tip number 2. My third tip, and one that I really haven't actually seen mentioned that many times around the traps, but one that I find just so beneficial, is that especially when you have tables like and it's generally your fact tables, right? So your fact tables, these are the ones that you might pull from a database and they've been made into this massive flat file with 100 different columns. Well, you can obviously reduce a lot of those columns in the query editor, and that's very important. But sometimes you do need to retain some of those columns. You might need to retain them because they obviously might have a relationship that you might want to connect up to a lookup table, or you might just want them there as a reference point, for example. But what you can do, especially if you want to reduce the number of columns here, because again, there's quite a few columns here, and I'm really not actually going to use these in anything. So this customer named index, I mean, I'm not going to use that in any visualization because it's just some random number. What use is that to me at all? That column there, that customer name index column, that's actually used to go connect up to the lookup table. But what you can do is you can hide columns. You can actually hide columns here, and then they don't actually appear in this section, in the field section. So you only have a lesser amount to choose from. And I've got to a point now where I basically hide everything. Anything that I'm not going to use as a dimension in any of my visualizations, I just hide it. And what I also do is I also hide these columns: total revenue, total unit cost. You know why? Because everything I do is in measures. It's all in measures. So I'm never ever going to reference this column. I'm never going to go here and drag total revenue into my report because I've always got it in this total sales. And that's where I want to reference that calculation. And so what I do is I actually go to these tables and then I go down and I hide in report view all of these columns that I'm not going to use. So I'm not going to use any of them because they're all going to be in measures. Order quantity, I can create a measure that goes sum of order quantity. I can create I don't need this because this is just an index column. This is an index column. This is also an index column. I don't even need the dates because we've got a date table, right? We have a date table that is going to be the reference of our dates. So I don't even need dates here. I'm going to hide dates. I'm going to hide ship date because again, we can use the date table. I don't even need an order. You may need an order number, you may not. It depends, actually. Sometimes you might use this in a table, so you might want to use it, but it's not going to be very good in anything other than a table because visualization isn't really going to be much use in a lot of cases. But I'm just going to show you that you can hide that as well. And check it out. There's only actually 3 columns that remain. And if I come back to here, only 3 columns to select from in dimensions. And that's really... that is really all, out of all that table, that's all we need. And that shows you how much you can reduce, or how much you can arrange or organize your models just by, hiding columns. You don't have to get rid of the columns. It just makes it far easier to go and figure out, well, what sort of references can we use in this particular table in a visualization. So there was 3 tips there. Hopefully you'll find those useful. I certainly do. I use them in every single model. Every single model I build, I use all of those techniques over and over and over again. They help so much in terms of your development in Power BI.